Welcome to Masters of Growth for Plaintiff Law Firms. This is where we sit down and talk to industry leaders to bring you lessons, stories, and insights that will help you grow your revenue, margins, and the happiness that you have at work. Ben, wonderful to have you on the podcast today. Really excited for our audience to hear from you. Maybe to start with, can you just tell me a little bit about you, your background, your firm, and also the great legal marketing firm that you have as well?
It's great to be here, Julian. It's a beautiful day in Northern Virginia. So the firm is BenGlassLaw. I crossed over 40 years of practice last October and 26 years, I think, with BenGlassLaw. And it's a personal injury firm in Virginia and a RISA long-term disability firm nationwide. So two different verticals. We don't know how to do your will or your divorce. We don't know anything about that. Just over 20 years ago, I started Great Legal Marketing. Dan Kennedy was my mentor, and I took things that I learned from Dan that I brought into BenGlassLaw, and then began at Dan's sort of insistence and encouragement to teach this to other lawyers. Back then, it was teaching personal injury lawyers how to advertise. Today really is teaching solo and small firm lawyers how to grow a great business. Advertising and marketing obviously is a big part of that, but it's a lot more to it, as you know.
That's fascinating. That makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, what's the biggest and most profound insight or lesson that you got through coaching or running your firm that you implemented, saw the difference in, and then realized, wow, I got to go help other people accomplish what I learned here or what I did here?
It's a really, really good question. And I think it's not a technology answer. It's not actually a marketing answer. It's an ego answer, which says once you realize that you have a superpower and that there's other people that have their own superpowers, and the more you can do work within your zone of genius and get other people to do work in their zone of genius, the better off and happier everybody is going to be. So for lawyers, the translation is you don't have to be the one to do everything. In fact, clients are hiring you for your strategic expertise. How can I solve whatever the problem is? There's so much of what we do in lawyering, right? From collection of medical records to taking depositions to trying cases, that the lawyer doesn't actually have to be the best in the world at and can't be the best in the world at. So once you get, that's why it's an ego thing, like getting your ego out of the way and let other people flourish around you. That is the secret. Now we can apply strategies, technologies, to that mindset. But if you don't have that mindset, it just makes it a whole lot harder to buy into anything that those of us who are teaching how to grow law firms are teaching.
That's so fascinating. And there's probably a certain amount of confidence that I could figure this out and do all the things. And it sounds like what you're saying is that itself is preventing certain firms, certain attorneys from growing because they're sort of trying to do everything when really they should be focusing on a narrower zone of genius.
Yeah, and the type of intelligence that makes you good enough to get good enough grades to get into law school, get through law school, pass the bar, that type of intelligence is generally not an entrepreneurial intelligence. And so we have to buy that talent or invest in ourselves to learn that talent, to turn that on. And that's the thing, because most everybody that we work with in Great Legal Marketing, they're a good lawyer. Like they know how to do their thing and they well serve their client. It's all of the other stuff. That's the entrepreneurial DNA that they oftentimes come to us. Sometimes it just needs to be unleashed, right? Other times they need to go out and to buy it in terms of acquiring talent inside their firm.
Fascinating. That's a really important recognition. I think even for entrepreneurs that consider themselves entrepreneurs, it's also a challenge to let go of areas that you think you should be doing. I once had an advisor in my last company that, and I'm paraphrasing here, he said the job of a CEO of a company, he said, you should do only what only you can do, and everything else should be delegated. And it sounds like that's sort of what you're saying here.
And it's simple to say that, and it's simple to put it on a plaque. It's one of the hardest things to really give yourself permission to believe and to do.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of countercultural too, because what else do you have in lawyers? Like this drive to be really busy and to do lots of things and bill your hours if you come from that side of the lawyering world. I've had a coach, a mindset coach for 15 of those years or so, Sammy Chong out of Toronto. A lot of my friends who are leading entrepreneurial firms have some sort of a psychologist, mindset coach, therapist. Again, not about strategy per se, Julian, but about what's going on inside of between your own ears, which is the biggest block to success. It's the stories you tell yourself that are negative.
Oh man, that resonates so much. But another question I had is you had mentioned, I think on your podcast and in our conversations about how you focus on firms, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, below about 5 million in annual revenue is kind of the sweet spot. Is that right?
Exactly. So most of them start, when they come to us, they start below 7 figures, and above 5 million, there's other people in the space that are better at that space. So yes,
perfect.
From 400 or 500K to $1.5 million is kind of where most firms who come to Great Legal Marketing are starting. Yeah.
That makes sense. So what have you found to be the biggest barrier to growth for firms or attorneys, partners in those firms that come to you? They've got, let's say, 450K in annual revenue for the last few years. They're trying to hit 5 million. What's the most common, biggest barriers that you see?
Well, so if you come to us and we can't help you, it's usually because we haven't been able to convince you of what we just talked about a few seconds ago. And giving you the confidence, because lawyers will come to us and they'll say, I can't imagine not being the one to take deposition. Nobody could take a deposition as good as I can. Well, that's objectively not true. There's lots of lawyers who can do stuff better than any one of us can. But that's the barrier. It's not relinquishing. It's not in EOS. They call it letting go of the vine. And the thing is, Julian, is once you try it and you find someone who has a zone of genius different from yours, and you go, oh my gosh, now it becomes addicting. How do I find the next one? So, Who Not How, Dan Sullivan's book, is all about that. It's who can I find that can do this thing better than I can? Now, if lawyers aren't willing to invest either the time, energy, or money to go find that person, then we really can't help them, because it's hard to scale if you're doing everything.
Right. That makes so much sense. So it sounds like, one of the biggest barriers is just that if someone's thinking how, not who, they're just thinking, how can I do this? I need to do more. I need to find more time. Next thing you know, they're working 120-hour weeks and they're burning out. And
yeah, we're creating unhappiness at that point, because there's a lot of things we can teach you to do or show you to do, but I'm not asking that you be the one that does it all. I'm asking you to develop a mindset that frames, okay, what's important? What will move the needle? How can we get that done, and through who? And a quick example is years ago, as we were trying to scale the ERISA disability practice, I thought, oh my gosh, nobody could write a ERISA brief like me. I'm the best. Well, I did. And, now I put the icing on really good briefs written by others, legal and non-legal staff, putting the pieces of the cake together, right? So we don't advocate everything, but at the end of the day, I'm responsible for making strategic decisions. I'm responsible for the icing. And that's a really cool place to play from. And that is scalable, really scalable.
I love that perspective. How should lawyers think about recruiting? Like if you're hiring non-lawyers to come and work in these functions, how can lawyers build that muscle of spotting good talent, developing talent, growing talent?
So let's recognize first that at the solo and small firm level, the thing that makes this hard is that we don't do it very frequently. Yeah. Okay, so we don't get a lot of at-bats in terms of hiring. The best marketing strategy is to clearly identify who you want to see walking through the door as a client. And just be brave to draw the picture of that person and then send marketing messages out speaking, quote, to that person. It's the same thing with hiring. So it's being very clear, I think, first of all, on what your need is. And today that need can be fulfilled everywhere from a full-time in-office 40-hour employee to we have a team, part of our team of 20 is a team of 3 in the Philippines who do things for us at a very, very high level of competency, including getting medical records, doing our social media, and things like that. So just recognize that this is hard. The clearer you are about who you want to see walking through the door, even virtually, the better off you're going to be. And then writing ads to that. So rather than writing a generic ad, hey, seeking experience, paralegal, 2 to 3 years experience, blah, 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 which is the same ad everybody's writing, right? Our ads tend to be, this would be a great position for you if, it won't be a great position for you if, this is who we are. Here's our collateral, like go check us out, go see our body of work, watch our videos, see if you even like us, and get people to do work. That also helps with screening when the autoresponders start coming in when you post the ad. But look, we, like many, are not experts at that because the number of reps that a small firm gets in a year is low.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned a couple of things that I often forget when hiring, because sometimes writing job posts is very difficult, but it is marketing. You're like, I need to market my company, my people, my culture, my employer brand, all this kind of stuff. And so I think that's a great point.
You know, the thing is, because you mentioned the word culture, that's so important because are you building a place where the team that you have in place now is going to be also enthusiastically looking for you or looking on your behalf? Who was the server at the restaurant or the barista? Maybe somebody to keep in mind. Now, if you've built a place where people don't like coming to work on Monday, that makes it all the harder to go find the next person who's going to raise the team up. And that's another thing. My friend Bill Biggs, who speaks a lot on recruiting and culture, says, you know, their big question is this potential new hire going to make us better? And it has to be unanimous yes amongst the 4 or 5 other team members who are in the interview process. And when that happens, what happens is, Bill says, is when the new person comes on board, and you've got 4 or 5 people who have vouched for that person and who will work hard to help make that person as successful as he or she can be. So, you know, we talk a lot about hiring to core values, but if you don't have core values, you don't live your core values, and you can skip that chapter, right? But it's really helpful in finding and then, you know, replacing when the time comes, because everybody, at some point, the relationship ends. If you're going to grow, Jillian, the people that get you to a certain level are not going to be the people that can get you to the next level. It's neither good nor bad. That is life. It is a fact of reality. And, you know, and you, as the owner, you have to be good with that, because A players, they want to play with A players. And when you keep a C player around, you drag the team down, and they wonder if you are, you know, have lost your marbles.
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
Sounds ruthless, but the reality is, you know, we chose entrepreneurship. And so we get both the benefits and the pain of entrepreneurship. It's our thing. Like, if we're going to make ourselves and our family happy, we have to be ruthless. And ruthless does not mean that you're a jerk. Ruthless means that you're paying attention and you're doing what's best for you and your family first, for your A players second. If you solve for those 2 things, your clients are going to be well served. The C players are not going to want to be there. They're going to want to leave on their own.
Yeah, that's so true. Sometimes when you do a really good job of that, of holding everyone to certain standards, the C players that you generally ought to let go of tend to filter themselves out on their own because it's not a fit.
And it's hard. Like in small law firms, it's hard because you know everybody. Like it's bigger if you're a company that employs 40,000 people around the world or whatever, how many people. It's different when you're 6 of you or 10 of you. It's just hard. But I think that's one of the reasons why finding a tribe and being in mastermind groups, you're a board of directors, so to speak, who will tell you, Julian, if you come back to one more meeting and Mary is still working for you, we're going to take you out to the back and beat you up. Okay. And then because you've complained about Mary the last 3 times you've been there, right. She's still there. Right. And so that's a value of being in, for small firm lawyers in particular, to be in a group of other like-minded individuals who will push you to help yourself, really.
Yeah, I love that. That makes so much sense. What are your thoughts on switching gears a little bit, given your own practice and obviously the help you do with other groups through great legal marketing? I talk to a lot of plaintiff firms, and you know, a lot of them are looking for more cases, looking to grow. Let's assume they've got their mindset correct. They're thinking about these things, or thinking about training and delegating certain tasks. What are some of the lowest hanging fruit or most common leaky buckets when people are trying to start marketing and growing their firm? Like, what are the most common mistakes where if you stepped into a firm, you're like, hey, with a 95% chance, I'll probably see this problem and this problem?
Yeah. So you used the phrase, the term leaky buckets, and that's exactly right. So my question would be, because most firms, they'll go, yeah, I want more. I just need more cases. I just need more clients. And we're like, well, why would you want to drive one more client into that cesspool where you don't have anyone good answering the phone? You don't have a good onboarding process for a new client. You're not making the new client feel wanted after the deal is sold, after they sign the fee agreement. And so, and those are all leaky buckets, because as you know, every phone call, every lead you get, form fill, whatever, has cost you money. And so much of what we're able to do at Great Legal Marketing for firms is this, to say to you, Julian, I'm going to save you money because we're going to cut out the bad spend. We're going to teach you to do things like listen to your inbound calls and now train off them. Either you or you hire someone to do this, and let's either improve it to excellent or replace the person who's trying to answer phones, in between doing his or her work. That would be the first thing. Is like, all right, what happens when someone actually takes on the risk of contacting you either through a form fill, a chat, or on the phone? Because that's a risk, right? They're reaching out. And then the other thing that I think that firms miss is just auditing their own website. And by auditing, I don't mean doing an SEO audit. I mean, does it actually work? What happens when someone fills out a form? Does it go to a page that thanks them and says, hey, you just filled out a form for a personal injury and this is what's going to happen next? Or does it just kind of go into the nether? So 80% of our money comes from a human being who's mentioned our name. That referred person is highly likely to now go digital to, quote, check us out, right?
Yeah.
So even if you have a referral-based practice, as we do, the web experience has to be excellent as well, because that's where they're going to go next before they pick up the phone to call you. Does the website make sense? Does it reinforce the notion that you are the wise man or woman at the top of the mountain for this particular problem? Is it easy to navigate? Does it make sense as to what we expect the web visitor to do next? And so those two things we just talked about, Julian, cost no money. Take some time to listen to calls, and you have to have technology built up, but that's easy. And it takes time to go do the, quote, web audit that I just described. Lawyers want to whip into their back pocket or their purse and whip out a credit card and go buy another lead somehow by running an ad without fixing those two things. That's silly. That's the first place we start. And then, looking at, again, the whole client journey and the experience they're having with your law firm. Do you have good systems? As case moves from one stage to the next, how is the client being advised? What, are they kept in the loop? Or do you have one of those law firms where people always have to call to say, Julian, what's going on with my case? Like, that never happens here, because we have a lot of built-in system, technology and processes and people who are proactive about the movement of the case and proactive about the client experience.
That makes a lot of sense. You mentioned something really interesting, which I think is a really important point that maybe a lot of people don't recognize. And I see this across industries. Just because it's a referral doesn't mean they don't come in through a digital channel. So I've heard some firms tell me like, oh, we get all referrals. I don't have to worry about marketing or website optimization, whatever, because my referrals are so great. But generally, from a consumer perspective, if someone gets a referral, they're probably getting usually a few referrals, and they're checking out a few different firms, and they're going on and they're looking at, like, they're still comparing some options before moving forward. They're probably not getting one referral. And so I think that's a really important point, that even though it's a referral, that's great. You still have to do the work to make that experience really strong.
You're also making some sort of a judgment. So, we have been referred, my family and I have been referred, contract people, services, driver's ed people. And, we go on the website and rightly or wrongly, we're making a judgment about whether that person can teach my kiddo to drive based upon their website. Now, there's really no logic there.
It's just humanity, human biases.
we are making, so, you have some website that looks like it was built in front page 25 years ago. That just sends a message. And what we want to be planting is what we call trust clues. All right. So it is a good, up-to-date, professionally created website. It's just a clue that may be the clue that helps us get over the edge there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The other thing, you mentioned is just listening to calls. It kind of maps back to that customer journey. How can lawyers think about what to look for? Like, what does good look like, and what should they be looking for when they start auditing those calls?
There's two things to look for. So one is, what questions are being asked by the caller? That means maybe your marketing isn't as good as you think it is if they're asking basic questions that they could find on your website. So it's always good to know what a personal injury caller sounds like. When I listen to calls, like, oh, really? Someone still has a concern about how they're going to pay. Billions of dollars have been spent on contingent fee, no win, no fee, right?
Yeah.
Billions and billions, and there are still people who don't know that. So that's number one thing. Like, what are they curious about? And the other is the skill to teach is listening. And what happens at so many firms, like it can be a youngin', a relatively new person in the workforce who may be answering your phones. And honestly, God, Julian, like they've lived their life with iPhones and texting, and they don't know how to talk on the phone. And so are they listening, right? Are they asking curious questions? And are they reinforcing the decision that Julian made to pick up the phone and call? Julian, sorry that you're in a car accident. However, Ben and Brian, like they're really, really good at what they do. And the team here is awesome. And we're going to try to help you. So enthusiastically, sounding like you really like working for me and that you truly believe that we are the best, which is what I want my team to believe, that we are the right place for a certain kind of case. Again, call about your divorce. That's not going to be the response. Right? Our Rolodex is big is going to be the response because we're so famous. We would say that, right? But that's what you want, I think, is the reselling of the idea that it was a good idea to call first. And Julian, all of us who are of a certain age, we've dealt with, insurance companies or credit card companies or, on the phone. And what companies are really, really good and make you feel like, okay, my problem is going to get solved because this person is good. And what types of calls and companies, like you don't come away feeling that your problem is going to get solved. So it requires a high level of emotional intelligence, I believe. And we believe that you can train for this, but not if you're not listening. And it's hard. Like the first time you sit down to listen to your calls, you need a waste basket because you're going to throw up. Like you can't believe what's actually being said on your behalf, no matter what training you've done. And that's just reality. And now today with, technology, Julian, we can take the recording of that call. We can create a transcript really quick. We can create training materials really quick. And one day, as you know, we're going to teach a machine how to do it really well. Really well. And I'm excited for that.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And it's funny, teaching a machine isn't too much different than teaching a person.
That machines show up, they're never tired, they don't get pissed off, and they don't take coffee breaks.
That is true.
Yeah.
So another question I had was this mindset of who, not how, that you talked about. I think a book that you had mentioned. When it comes to doing intake or sales, I think of intake as sales. I don't see how it's different. I've talked to a lot of plaintiff firms that the attorney gets on at some point in the process, either very early or maybe after a call or two, and like no client can be signed in absence of a 1-hour consult with an attorney, as an example. I've seen a bunch of firms doing this. Why is that a good idea or a bad idea? Or are there situations where it is a good idea or a bad idea? Why can't someone else sell my services? If I am a service delivery, I'm essentially a product. Why can't someone else sell that product? Or why should I be the one to sell it? So
let me first say, and I don't pretend to be a legal ethics expert for all 50 states, but some states I've heard require, before a fee agreement is signed, an attorney be involved. Virginia is not one of those. Now, and you're going to get differing opinions on this. The higher up the food chain or the value ladder that call sounds, the quicker we are going to get an attorney on the call. However, getting an attorney on every call at the earliest stage is, in our view, wasteful because most of the calls that you're going to get aren't cases that you're going to take. And so there's a whole science of, it's disrupted your day and you're thinking whatever else you were working on. This is an argument for in-house reception, in-house sales as well, because you literally can knock on the wall or run down the hall if your team thinks it would be valuable to get an attorney on the call right now, which is hard to do when the sales team is virtual. So just know that. I think the important thing is, do you have a case criteria like of yes, no, or maybe? Do you have a team that's trained to that to get, in our case, to get the lawyer on the call when the case sounds like it's a serious case? And serious is going to be different for everybody. So I don't think there's any right answer for that. I think it's one of those leaky bucket things we talked about earlier that can be, training requires the owner to be thinking a little bit in advance and learning objectively what's actually happening on the ground. I don't think there's a wrong answer to any of that at all. And just know that some states require that there be attorney involvement. We were surprised, in COVID, and when, the world, including us, went more to electronic fee agreements and, just click to sign. We were surprised at how many people did not want to talk to an attorney, did not need to talk to an attorney, and return the thing in 12 seconds. So apparently this whole idea of we thinking that we need to be involved as lawyers wasn't true for a lot of cases, isn't true for a lot of cases. So again, that's an assumption that lawyers make that COVID taught us, at least this law firm, was wrong.
COVID was such a forcing function to digitize so many processes that people thought undigitizable, if that's even a word.
Including court appearances.
Yeah, exactly. I find it fascinating that there's some firms I've chatted with and the amount of investigation work they do or attorney involvement they have before signing the case. I'm always like, if it meets the criteria, why not just sign them for an investigation session or something, and then afterwards sign them to be an actual client, and maybe don't charge for the investigation. There's
multiple philosophies on that too. So the philosophy is sign everyone and then kick the bad cases out later, which we haven't adopted because we think that leaves a poor customer experience, client experience. And then there's let's vet the case and then sign it. Again, there's not a right or wrong answer. It's how do you want to run the practice? And then are you consistent in how you're running your practice?
Yeah. That makes so much sense. Where can people listening find more about you, about Great Legal Marketing, and maybe specifically about Great Legal Marketing? What can they expect to get out of that program if they were to join?
So I think the first thing, go sign up and subscribe to the Renegade Lawyer podcast. I talk to a lot of people and you'll hear my philosophy. So you will understand whether you are aligned philosophically with my view of the world and the lawyer world. GreatLegalMarketing.com is where you can find more information about Great Legal Marketing. We have memberships at different levels. We have events that we do. Brian and I put out a lot of information on LinkedIn for free that you can just come and grab. We've got a number of books in the marketplace, and we're working on a rewrite of our most popular book, Renegade Lawyer Marketing. And so this is what I would say, here's our superpower in that space, is talking to a law firm owner and finding out where are you and where do you want to be, and then helping you, Julian, figure out, okay, here's the best use of your next hour or your next dollar. Because there's a lot of choices you have at just where to spend your money and your time. And I think we're really good at helping you make that correct next choice, which usually when you start working with us is you're going to be saving money because we're going to cut out bad spend, maybe bad people, whatever. And then we're going to think, all right, what could you do to drive more leads? Maybe it's fixing website. Maybe it's developing, your own personal brand a little better. It's rarely ever go out and spend a whole bunch of money on buying leads. That's not our space. Let's build something good, starting with, Julian, what kind of life do you want to live? Great. What kind of practice would serve that life? What kind of client would serve that practice? Now, if we know those answers, Julian, now here's the marketing that gets that client to pay attention to you and to be walking through your door. That takes some work, right? It doesn't happen overnight. That's what we're really, really good at, Brian and I. Unabashedly, we'll say that. That's our zone of genius. That's what we like doing really well. We'll help you decide who's a good vendor, what's a good contract, how much should you guys spend. Yeah.
That's a great answer. All those resources you mentioned, I will put those in the show notes for everyone listening, so you can go check out all the content that Ben is putting out in his team. It's awesome. I've gone through a bunch. I listened to a lot of podcasts before you and I met. So thank you for doing that work. Love what you're doing for the community and for firm owners across the country. Ben, it's been wonderful. I think that's a wrap for today.
Appreciate you, Julian. Talk to you later, man.
Likewise. Take care.